Welcome to episode 153. This is a replay of episode 59, which was my very first interview, and it was with my husband. Now, the thing that you might think is that, he was probably my guinea pig, and you would be correct. However, I also enjoyed being able to talk to him about our adventures in marriage, and I can't wait for you to hear it as well. Enjoy. Let the adventure begin with Chris Denker podcast. And the time has come. The time has come for the podcast to have its very first guest. And in the immortal words of talk show host David Letterman, my next guest, or in this case, my first guest, needs no introduction. However, I will give him one anyway. Welcome to the show. My husband, my life partner, my true partner in crime, the one who completes me, the yang to my yin, Jack Denker. So how was that for an introduction?
Wow, that was something. I really don't know what to say, but I am honored to come upon your show with not needing any kind of introduction.
Well, this episode, I wanted it to be about adventures in marriage, because a lot of the episodes that I've talked about relationships and what makes them work, with friendships and such, and we have been married for 34 years and counting. So I just thought it would be awesome for us to, just talk about what has worked, what we've learned from each other in 34 years, just to share that out, and maybe let people in on a little bit of our weirdness.
Well, absolutely. It's something I'm really proud of, and I don't think they'll have any trouble discovering the weirdness that we live by.
Okay, so the first question I want to, ask, because this is all about adventures, is what is one adventure that pops into your head that you really enjoyed? Something that, again, I know there's so many things you could choose from in 34 years of marriage, but what's something that, with that question that's like, boom, this pops into my head?
So many to pick from, but the one that I'm going to go with is connected to kids. And not only raising our two wonderful kids, Nolan and Jalen, but the one I'm really going to focus on today is coaching together. The adventure that you and I went through when I was the varsity girls basketball coach at Nebraska City High School, and you were my assistant. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that from really the beginning of our relationship all the way through our relationship, it has centered around kids. And the adventures that have gone along with that, I think, to a large degree, have been a big indicator in our relationship. Really, kind of been something I'm super proud of, because we had go through a lot of ups and downs as coaches together, mm-hmm. and we had to go through a lot of ups and downs as parents with our children. And so I think the adventures we shared as parents of our mm-hmm. two kids, and the adventures that we shared coaching our young athletes, mm-hmm. Are two of the greatest adventures that we were a part of during mm-hmm. our time together.
And talking about that, a couple of things just pop into my head. And I still remember, and I can't remember exactly how it went down, but the first time we were coaching at a varsity basketball game together, it was at Waverly. And I was like making a suggestion or something, and you snapped a little bit. And then you looked at me and you were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And the girls on the bench were like, "Oh, like that's so cute." And we're going, "Oh my gosh, that can never happen again." Because even though we're husband and wife, we were head coach and assistant coach, and we had to kind of make that division, and sometimes that's really hard to do.
Well, of course, absolutely, we had to find our way, and and that was that was a moment where we kind of spoke as we are in a coaching mm-hmm. situation, and realized that we still got to keep them somewhat separate. It also reminds me of the time when, in between games, when you would coach the junior varsity team, I would come down and we would talk about we would talk about what was going right and what was going wrong in those JV games. And I'll never forget one time I overstepped when I came and sat behind your bench. You're coaching your JV game, and I came and sat behind the bench and was just kind of watching everything that was going on. And I can't really remember if I offered any suggestions, tips, or whatever at that point in time. But you made it very clear to me in between the first and second half that my position was to be across the gym, watching as a normal spectator, not to invade your coaching space, and that we would have our time to talk in between halves, just like we always had. And so we had to find our way. We had, what was going to work and how we were going to be able to, make this work, not only as husband and wife, but as coach and assistant coach.
Yeah. And as coaches, I became a head varsity basketball coach at the school that I was in. And one of the things that I remember as an adventure in that respect is that, we had to trade, we traded off. Our kids went with us everywhere. And I even remember when I was the assistant volleyball coach at Peru State College and you were the assistant women's basketball coach at Peru State College, and our seasons would overlap. And so I would be getting done with practice. You would bring the kids down to Peru from Nebraska City, and for like open gyms or whatever. And we would do the swap. The kids would come back home with me, and then you would come back home. And there was a lot of, when you have two coaches in the same household, then there's a lot of organizing and a lot of just keeping track of everything. With that as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great challenges, but also great adventures.
Oh yeah. And before we move on and talk about something else, there is one other adventure, and I know when I talk about this with coaching that it will be really, it wasn't anything with us coaching together, but when I was a head girls basketball coach and our kids were fairly young, my husband Jack had come to a game and our kids were there.
I know where you're going with this.
And I'm coaching the game, and Jack is having a conversation with our head boys basketball coach. And pretty soon, and he was supposed to be, keeping an eye on our children because mom was coaching. Pretty soon, he's in conversation, and I have my daughter, I think, on my lap, and my son sitting beside me, and I'm like, how did this happen? What in the world? And I was so perturbed with you when that happened.
Yeah, nothing needed to be said. All I needed to do was look across the gym, and I saw my kids right there on the bench with Chris, as she said. And all I had to do was look at her, and that steely stare she had and that look on her face that said, come get these kids. I'm in the middle of coaching a basketball game. And again, I think that story just typifies the adventures of our raising our kids and coaching, and just kind of brings them all together.
And along those lines, we've always, I think one of the first things that connected us as a couple and that we've always had in common, sports. I mean, sports of all kinds. And both of us are pretty competitive. And so what popped into my head as an adventure, and we've talked about this, we knew that we were going to make it as a couple when we made it through our honeymoon. So the adventure that I think about was our very first one as a married couple. And we went to Colorado. It was in the summer. And we, the scenery was beautiful. We went to this resort. But we like to play sports. So I can't remember if it was tennis we played first.
Started first with tennis,
okay. Yep. And, the thing is that all is well and good. And I know this sounds mean. All is well and good when Jack is beating me.
Yep.
But then when I start playing better and doing better, suddenly Jack gets a little testy.
Yes. Well, it wasn't just that, but the tides turned. So we started playing tennis, and I was winning every point in virtually every game. And suddenly Chris found her groove, and we had some good matches. And then all of a sudden the tide completely turned, and she was beating me consistently. And yes, I did not enjoy that nearly as much.
And then the probably the worst was when we played racquetball.
Oh, yeah.
Jack played a lot of racquetball in college. I had never really played racquetball, and so this was a new endeavor for me. And the poor guy's trying to give me some instructions, and he turns to give me instructions, and I hit the ball. I did not hit it against the wall. I clocked my husband. I think we clocked you in the eye or in the side of the head. As he turned around to tell me something, wham! There I was.
Yeah, it was the eye, and my vision's never been the same ever since. And I knew right then and there that, never put a ball and a racket in my wife's hand if I make her mad. The outcome will never be good.
And then I think we played ping pong.
Yes,
as
ping
well.
pong.
And there was some residual from the racquetball because there were a few times when when you have if you've ever played ping pong and you've had that opportunity to slam it on someone. But, this is our honeymoon. This is it's supposed to be all about love. And so far we've had competition in tennis. I've, whacked my husband in the eye with a racquetball. And now in, ping pong, he slammed it home. It was like game on. And so I feel like from the moment we got married and just that whole trip in and of itself, I was like, we're going to make it. Because if we can make it past all this competitiveness and, harm, then we're good. We're going to be good.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but even though it's a lot of fun and games, we have a really good time. There are challenges in any long-term relationship, whether it's, a marriage, a long-term friendship, a long-term partnership. There are always challenges. So what do you think have been some of the challenges that we've had along the way?
I would say that for us, thankfully we haven't had a whole lot of significant challenges, but some that have been a part of our life would have to be, just establishing our spaces. Mm-hmm. Because we spend a ton of time together. I mean, we really do spend a lot of time together, and because we have so much in common and so many similar interests. But at the same time, we have different interests and different things that we like to do, and so trying to figure out how we can do things on our own, and do things on our own, but always make sure that we're staying together as a team. So I'd say that, personal space, finding a way to maneuver that for each of us has been challenging over the course of 34 years. And early on in our marriage, I think our finances were a challenge, how we were going to manage those. And, we learned a way that would work and a system that would work. And I think it really worked wonders for our marriage. I mean, there was some stress, like many young couples, over finances, and we were no different. And I think once we discovered a way that worked for us, finances really never became a problem or a challenge for us ever after. Mm-hmm. So I would say, personal space, finding that, comfort in our space, and then finances would be two challenges that come to my mind.
Yeah, with finances, they, studies will say that is, one of the bigger triggers that can often spell disaster for a lot of relationships, is that being able to come to terms with those. And I remember that there were times, like you said early on, that I ran us over balance a couple of times, and so then you took over the finances, and then I felt like you never did this, but I always felt like I was having to ask permission to spend money. Mm-hmm. And I hated that feeling. Yeah. And we finally, after I had overdrawn us a couple of times and then got, and then me feeling like I'm asking permission, we finally decided, well, what would fix this? And we decided to each have our own checking accounts. And I know there are a lot of people that are like, oh no, don't do that, but it was a game changer for us. Mm-hmm. We have decided who has which bills, and then we're split pretty equally as to what each of us is in charge of, and then how we decide to spend our money or save it is completely up to us. because we know in our marriage, Jack is the saver, I am the spender. And so I've even told him that he can never leave me because he's been the one to save. I'm the bank of mom, and I love to spend freely on our kids still as adults and our grandkids. Mm-hmm. But he's the one who is the saver. And that has worked out well for us, because when you have two people who are completely different when it comes to finances, that can really doom, I think, a lot of relationships.
100%. And I also think that just that story that you shared there kind of goes back to both the adventures of the first question and the challenges of the second, because we had challenges in that, but because you are the spender, you have given us opportunities for adventure, because I'm super conservative and a saver, and so I don't take those adventures the way that you do. So you bring them to the table and get me to do those kinds of things, which are important to any successful, healthy relationship and marriage. And then also the challenge of, once we decided to have our separate checkbooks, it just opened up a whole new level of independence that I talked about in the challenges question, where we just had that, we found our space, something that we could do together. Finances are still together, but we did them individually.
Right.
And we found that individual space that worked for both of us.
Mm-hmm. And I like, when you talked about giving each other space. And one thing, we took a huge leap of faith 5 years ago when we decided to downsize. We sold our house and decided to move into a 1-bedroom apartment, which to a lot of people might not be a big deal, but to my husband's credit, you had never ever lived in an apartment. In college, Jack was in a fraternity, then he and 2 of his fraternity brothers rented a house. When he got his first job, he rented a house and then bought his first house. So, that was one of those things with space, to go from, we basically had a 4-bedroom home over 2,000 square feet, and we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment that was a little over 800 square feet. So, as far as, giving space, and then, part of that time was during COVID. So as 2 teachers trying to navigate being able to teach in our spaces and knowing who is going to be teaching, and it's okay, I need to be here, but you have 1 bedroom. That really took a lot for us.
Yeah, it was. And it was a huge leap of faith. And as Chris described, it was completely out of my comfort zone, something I've never, ever experienced in my life. But I can safely say it was amazing how well it went. Even the 1-bedroom apartment, there were challenges within that, just space challenges, 1 bathroom, dealing with that and all that kind of thing. But overall, it was a wonderful experience. We've moved since to a 2-bedroom villa, and that's been an even better experience. But it, again, just ties into the adventures that we've been able to find. And this one really, to my surprise, has turned out to be a really good one.
Yeah. So, in the big picture, what makes a long-term relationship work?
For me, it's really 3 things. Number 1 is communication. I mean, the success of any relationship. And again, I'll take it back to raising our kids, to Chris and I as teachers, Chris and I as coaches. It all comes down to communication. I mean, if you do anything in a relationship to make it successful, it has to be strong communication. Mm-hmm. Number 2 for me is having fun. I mean, we really try hard, both of us, to bring the fun to our relationship. And fortunately, we are from families that are very fun. We just have great fun with each of our families and all the members of our families. And so we just try to bring fun every day. We try to do something fun, just try to have fun with everything we do. And I think having fun is extremely important. And then the 3rd one for me is just being humble. Don't take yourself so seriously. We always think, and this is easier to say now that we're older than it was when we were first starting out as a married couple, but everything is so important and everything is so meaningful and going to have an impact on the rest of our lives, and we just take ourselves so seriously. And once I started to learn to take myself less seriously and try to have more fun and enjoy the moment, I hope I was easier to live with. And I think those are the 3 keys to success for our marriage, in my opinion. Communication, having fun, and staying humble.
And, and then piggybacking off of especially what you talked about with communication, being able to not only talk to each other, but really listen to each other. And that's just hard for anyone. I mean, it's a lot of times when you're talking, or when someone's talking, you're thinking in your mind about what you want to say and how you want to respond, instead of just really settling in and listening to what that person is saying and bringing to the table. So that whole listening component in communication is really important. And then when you talked about fun, just trying new things. Like, for example, we are now pickleball players. Mm-hmm. We played pickleball for the first time, and people, to look at pickleball, it doesn't look like it's all that, a lot of exercise, but oh my gosh, there's a lot more to it than you anticipate. So, doing some different things that are maybe out of your comfort zone and just trying new things together is important. And, for me too, making it work is giving each other, you talked about space, but giving each other the space to do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And that is okay. Yep. And encouraged. Like, for example, you went to Newton, Iowa last weekend with a buddy of yours to see an IndyCar race, and you got to see Brad Paisley and
Kenny Chesney.
Oh, sorry, Kenny Chesney, and then Carrie Underwood in concert. Sorry, I don't know why I had Brad Paisley in my head, but yeah, Kenny Chesney. And so you went away for the weekend, and I stayed at home and was just able to chill and do some reading and do a little writing and doing my own thing. Last night, Jack went out to dinner with a buddy of his, and I went for apps and drinks with some friends of mine. So not feeling that you have to do everything together, because that's how you grow as a couple, when you're able to do some things on your own and then come back together.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
And I think it just makes you appreciate your time together even more.
Oh, yes. 100%.
But I want to go back to when you talked about listening.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you should say that, because that is a tremendously important part of the communication component. But I thought it was interesting that you brought that up, because my wife is probably the best listener of anyone I've ever met. And she's always been that way. I mean, she's a great communicator, but the reason she's a great communicator is she's just a really good listener. And over the time we've spent together, I think she's had a big influence on me and helping me become a better listener, because I don't think I was as good a listener early on in our relationship as I am now. And I think the fact that she is such a good listener and a good role model in that way, it's helped make me become a better listener in our relationship. Yeah.
Well, overall, with this episode, it's not like we have, the cure-all. We don't have all the answers. I just thought it would be fun for us to, have an episode together. I thought about, who I wanted to start having interviews during the second year of the podcast. And I'm like, who better to start with than my husband and my ride or die. Mm-hmm. And so before we go, I'm going to be doing this little kind of like quick types of questions, like just you don't really get time to think about them. Just so you know, folks, he has not been privy to these questions ahead of time. I'm just going to throw them at him. And this will just give you an opportunity, in this case, to get to know Jack Danker a little bit better.
All right, bring it.
Are you ready?
Bring it.
Okay. Question number 1, mountains or beach?
Beach.
Oh. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Number 2, sweet or salty?
Oh, sweet. 100%. No doubt.
Summer or winter?
Oh, summer.
See, it's so funny because, once you've been with someone, for as long as we've been together, you kind of predict what they're going to say. And so I'm really waiting for one of these questions that he's going to answer. And I'm going to go, oh, I didn't know that. But so far, I am 3 for 3.
And on a side note, if we were to flip the script here, just to show you how Chris and I are very much alike, but we're also very different, she would answer that question with, winter. So we're opposite in our favorite seasons, which is very interesting.
And I would have also answered mountains.
Yeah.
Sweet or salty, I don't know. I'm such a combo.
You like them both, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you haven't been able to pick up on this throughout this episode, we do love sports. So the next 3 questions all have to do with sports.
Okay.
All right. So what is your favorite sport to watch?
Football.
Okay. Who is your favorite sports team?
Oh, I've got 4 of them.
I know.
Do I have to pick one of the 4?
Yeah. Okay, so tell us your 4.
Okay, so in baseball, it's the Houston Astros. In basketball, it's the San Antonio Spurs. In football, it's the Los Angeles Rams. And in hockey, it's the St. Louis Blues.
Okay, so now you have to pick one. You can only watch one of those 4 teams. Who's it going to be?
Oh, my word. That would be very, very difficult. I would be an unhappy man. But if I had to pick one team to watch, I'd probably pick the Houston Astros because they've been my favorite team the longest. And baseball season is the longest in terms of the number of games they play. So I get to see my favorite team play the most by watching baseball.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, also along the sports vein, what was your favorite sports moment to watch?
Oh, so many. I think I'm going to take it to Nebraska's, and I got to go 3 because it's all 3 of them are equally as impactful, but all 3 national championships that Nebraska has won in college football. I was just a little guy when they won their first national championship under Bob Devaney, and then the 2 that Tom Osborne won in his dynasty years at Nebraska. Those were probably the highlights of my fan time. And so, yeah, I think those national championships. So I kind of cheated on that question, but all 3 are equally as important to me.
Okay, I should have known that that's the direction you would go. But I was thinking about, with your favorite sports teams. And for some reason, I had when the Blues won the Stanley Cup. Just because, I don't know, it was just so fun to watch it together.
Yeah. And
to just see your reaction. I don't know, for some reason I thought that might be your choice, but then I was like, oh, why wouldn't it be Husker football?
But that was also a good choice on your part because when the St. Louis Blues won their championship, that completed all of my favorite teams, all 4 professional teams had won championships after the St. Louis Blues had won their Stanley Cup. So that was rewarding to have been able to witness and watch all my teams win championships during my lifetime. So good choice. It kind of ended that reign of championships for my teams.
See, these are supposed to be quick hitter questions,
I know.
But as you can tell, when we start talking sports,
we're dragging them on.
Ooh. All right, so I'm going to move away from sports. You can only eat one food for every meal. What is it?
Pizza.
What was your very first job ever?
Newspaper carrier. Had a paper route.
Favorite color?
Blue.
Which I find it interesting. You can't see him, but he's wearing blue today.
Yes, I am.
And last but not least, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
This is going to sound very boring, but right where I'm at right now.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we close it out on you being the first guest of the podcast?
Well, it's been quite the honor to be the first guest on my wife's podcast. I'm super proud of all that she's been able to do with this podcast in just a shade over a year. And I hope I lived up to not needing any introduction with my answers to your questions today.
Very, very much so. So there you have it, my very first interview with the love of my life after 36 years of marriage. It was a lot of fun for us to do, and I'm thinking Jack needs to make another appearance in year number 4 of the podcast. That's all I have for you for this week. I am excited that next week I will be back with a fresh episode. And until next week, I hope you let your adventure begin. Peace.